I still hear her voice when I close my eyes. It meant nothing. Emma said it slowly, like she was talking about a broken glass, not my heart. I stared at her and asked, "Say that again." She crossed her arms and looked past me. "I told you already. It meant nothing." I laughed, sharp and ugly. "You slept with Liam," I said. "You cried on my shoulder about work, about stress, about everything, and you slept with him." She sighed. "Don't make it sound worse than it is." I stepped closer. "Worse? You want worse?" She finally looked at me. "I didn't love him." "So that makes it okay?" I asked. She shook her head. "I didn't say that." I waited. "Then say something that fixes this." She didn't. The silence burned more than shouting. "How long?" I asked. "It was one time," she said. "One time is all it takes," I said. My phone buzzed. Liam's name lit the screen. I showed it to her. "You still talk to him?" She swallowed. "He keeps texting." "And you keep answering," I said. She whispered, "I didn't want to hurt you." I laughed again. "That's funny, because that's all you did." She reached for me. "Please don't walk away." "You already walked away," I said. "You just didn't pack a bag." She cried then. "I'm sorry." "Sorry you did it," I asked, "or sorry you got caught?" She didn't answer. I remembered Liam's smile, his jokes, the nights we drank together. "How long have you both been lying to me?" I asked. "He kissed me first," she said quickly. I nodded. "And you didn't stop him?" She whispered. I was confused. "No," I said. "You were selfish." She snapped. "You're not perfect either." That hurt more than I expected. "So this is my fault now?" I asked. "I didn't say that," she said, crying harder. "You don't have to," I said. "You already chose." She begged. "We can fix this." I shook my head. "I can't fix what you broke." She fell onto the couch. "I love you." I felt tired. "You love the version of me that forgives everything." She looked up. "Isn't that love?" I grabbed my jacket. "No. That's convenience." She followed me to the door. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere you're not," I said. She grabbed my arm. "Please." I pulled away. "If it meant nothing," I said, "why does it feel like everything is gone?" She had no answer. I opened the door. My chest hurt, my hand shook, but my voice stayed calm. "Goodbye, Emma." I walked out before she could say my name again. The hallway felt too quiet. She followed me anyway. "Don't do this," she said. I stopped and turned. "You already did." She wiped her face. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "A mistake is forgetting keys. This was a choice." She whispered, "I was scared you'd leave someday." I stared at her. "So you pushed me first." She didn't answer. "Liam was my friend," I said. "He knew everything about us." She nodded. "He said you took me for granted." I laughed softly. "And you believed him." "He listened to me," she said. "I listened too," I said. "Every night." She covered her mouth. I felt invisible. "Then you should have spoken," I said. "Not slept with someone else." Her voice shook. "I thought you'd fight harder." That sentence broke something in me. "I shouldn't have to fight for loyalty," I said. "I gave you trust for free." She stepped closer. "Say you'll think about it." I shook my head. Thinking is what got me hurt. She grabbed my sleeve again. "What about our plans?" "They died the moment you said his name," I said. She cried. "I can't lose you." "You already did," I said quietly. She slid down the wall. "I'll cut him off." "Do it for yourself," I said. "Not for me." She whispered my name. I didn't respond. I walked down the stairs. Each step felt heavy, but also clear. Outside, the air was cold. I pulled out my phone and deleted Liam's number without hesitation. I stood there, breathing, listening to my heart slow down. I realized something painful and true. I loved her more than she loved me, and that meant staying would only teach her how to hurt me again. I looked back once at the building. It meant nothing, I repeated to myself. That was the lie that ended us, and the truth that finally set me free. I walked away knowing pain would follow me for years, but I also knew this night drew a line in my life, separating who I was from who I would become, alone, wounded, but finally honest with myself for the first time. For 3 years, I spoke to almost no one about Emma. When Rachel asked, "Are you eating?" I answered, "Yes." When she asked, "Are you sleeping?" I lied and said, "Fine." One night she said, "You don't sound fine." I replied, "I don't want to talk." She didn't push. That was her way. Silence without abandonment. I changed cities because the streets remembered her. I changed jobs because my old desk still felt like ours. Mark noticed first. "You don't talk much," he said during lunch. I shrugged. "Nothing worth saying." He laughed. "That's never true." I looked at my phone and said, "Trust me." He didn't ask again. Late nights were the worst. I'd sit alone and hear Emma's voice asking, "Why are you so quiet?" I'd answer the memory, "Because you broke something." Then I'd argue with myself. Maybe I ignored her. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe if I had listened more. Those thoughts didn't need answers. They just wanted to hurt me. Rachel called every Sunday. "You don't date," she said once. "I'm busy," I replied. She sighed. "You're scared." I snapped, "I'm careful." She paused, then said, "Careful isn't the same as closed." I hung up and felt guilty immediately. At work, Mark tried again. "Drinks after work?" he asked. I said, "Another time." He raised an eyebrow. "You say that every time." I told him, "I like being alone." He replied, "No, you're just used to it." That annoyed me because it felt true. Some nights I blamed Emma. Other nights I blamed myself. "You trusted too easily," I told my reflection. "You missed the signs." The mirror never argued. That made it worse. Rachel visited one weekend. She looked around my apartment and said, "It's too quiet." I replied, "I like it." She shook her head. "No, you survive it." I asked, "What's the difference?" She answered softly, "One heals. The other just waits." I didn't know it then, but waiting was already changing me, slowly, silently, without permission. I walked into the conference room thinking only about numbers. Daniel was already there, flipping through slides. "You're late," he said. I replied, "Traffic." I took a seat, opened my notebook, and looked up. That's when I saw her. Emma sat across the table, hands folded, eyes wide. She froze. I froze. 3 years collapsed into one breath. Daniel said, "Let's begin." Emma looked down. I didn't. I said nothing. Daniel continued, "This partnership matters." I nodded. Sophia spoke next. "We are excited to collaborate." Her voice was steady. Emma stayed silent. I kept my face neutral. Inside, my heart hit my ribs. Daniel asked, "Any concerns?" I said, "None." Emma finally spoke. "No concerns." Her voice cracked. I didn't react. Slides changed. Numbers moved. I focused hard. Daniel asked me, "Thoughts?" I answered clearly. Emma watched me like I was a stranger. Sophia whispered to her, "Are you okay?" Emma nodded too fast. I remembered nights Emma said, "Look at me." I didn't look now. Daniel said, 5-minute break. Chairs scraped. I stood immediately. Emma stood too. She followed me into the hallway. "Please," she said softly. I kept walking. "Just 1 minute," she added. I stopped but didn't turn. "We are in a meeting," I said. "It's not appropriate." She said my name. Hearing it hurt. "Don't," I said. She whispered, "I didn't expect this." I replied, "Neither did I." That was the truth. She stepped closer. "You look different." I said, "So do you." She asked, "Are you okay?" I laughed quietly. That's not your concern. She flinched. I deserve that, she said. I turned then. You don't deserve anything from me. Her eyes filled. Can we talk after? I shook my head. No, she said. Please. I said, this conversation is over. I walked back inside. Sophia glanced at Emma. Everything all right? Emma said, yes. Daniel looked at me. Ready? I said, always. The meeting resumed. Emma avoided my eyes now. I felt powerful and hollow at the same time. Daniel wrapped up. Good work, he said. I nodded. As people packed up, Emma waited. Sophia left first. Daniel clapped my shoulder. You handled that well. I asked, handled what? He smiled. Exactly. He walked away. Emma stood alone. I grabbed my bag. She blocked my path gently. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I just want to explain. I replied, explanations don't change choices. She whispered, I think about you every day. I said, you should think about why. She swallowed. I made a mistake. I answered, you made a decision. She said, I lost everything. I looked at her. No, I said. You lost me. She stepped aside. I never stopped caring. I paused. I stopped needing. That silence between us felt heavy and final. I walked past her. She didn't follow this time. As the elevator doors closed, I caught her reflection. She looked smaller. I felt taller. For the first time, she was reaching, and I was already gone. I agreed to meet Emma at a quiet cafe because she wouldn't stop asking. She said, I just want you to hear me. I replied, I'm not here to comfort you. She nodded. I know. We sat across from each other. She looked smaller than I remembered. Start talking, I said. She took a breath. Liam never chose me. I raised an eyebrow. You chose him. She shook her head. He promised things he never meant. I said, so did you. She winced. He told me I mattered. I replied, and I didn't. She whispered, you did. I waited. Then why? She looked down. Because I was weak. I laughed softly. That's the first honest thing you've said. She swallowed. After you left, he disappeared. I said, convenient. She continued, he denied everything. He told people I chased him. My jaw tightened. He let you take the fall. She nodded. I lost friends. I said, you lost me first. Tears filled her eyes. I deserved it. I stayed quiet. She reached for her coffee but didn't drink. I thought he'd fight for me. I said, he never fought for anyone but himself. She whispered, I see that now. I leaned back. You didn't then. She said, I was chasing validation. I replied, and you crushed trust. She nodded. Every day I wake up with guilt. I asked, does guilt fix anything? She shook her head. No, I said, then why tell me? She looked at me. Because you deserve the truth. I laughed again. 3 years late. She flinched. I know. Silence sat between us. She broke it. Do you hate me? I answered honestly. I don't know. She whispered, that's worse. I said, hate is simple. This isn't. She cried quietly. I ruined my own life. I replied, you made choices. She said, Liam manipulated me. I leaned forward. He didn't force you. She nodded quickly. I know. I watched her shake. I lost respect, she said. At work. At home. I asked, what did you expect? She answered, I thought love would save me. I shook my head. Love isn't a shield. She wiped her face. I see that now. She looked at me and said, I never stopped loving you. I felt something twist. Love without loyalty is empty, I said. She whispered, I was afraid you'd leave. I replied, So you betrayed me first. She nodded. Yes. I exhaled slowly. That fear became a prophecy. She cried harder. I wanted you to chase me. I said, I shouldn't have to chase honesty. She said, I know. I looked at her. Why Liam? She hesitated. Because he listened when I complained. I said, I listened when you cried. She whispered, I took you for granted. That hurt more than insults. You did, I said. She asked, can you forgive me? I paused. Forgiveness isn't reunion. She nodded. I know. I added, and it's not automatic. She said, I'll wait. I replied, don't. She looked confused. Why? I said, waiting keeps you stuck. She whispered, I deserve to be stuck. I said, punishing yourself won't heal you. She looked surprised. You still care. I shook my head. I still understand pain. Silence returned. She stood. Thank you for listening. I said, that's all this was. She nodded. I lost you because I was weak. I answered, and weakness has consequences. She paused. Liam tried to contact you. I looked up. When? She said, last year. My stomach tightened. What did he say? She replied, that he missed you. I laughed. Tell him nothing. She nodded. I already did. I stood. This changes nothing. She said, I know. As I left, I realized something unexpected. Hearing her regret didn't heal me, but it freed me from imagining her as a monster. She wasn't evil. She was human, selfish, and afraid. And that truth hurt less than the lie I carried for years. Rachel called me one morning, voice buzzing with excitement. Did you hear? I asked, hear what? She laughed. Liam. He's been fired. Not just from work, everywhere. I paused. Everywhere. She said, yeah. People don't trust him anymore. He burned bridges, alienated friends. Karma's swift. I smiled faintly. I didn't do anything. She said, exactly. You survived, he fell. Later, Mark dropped by my office. You look smug, he said. I replied, I've just been watching life take its course. He raised an eyebrow. You mean karma? I nodded. It's not revenge. I didn't intervene. He made the choices himself. Mark laughed. Some people deserve it more than they know. I said, it's strange. I feel calm, not vengeful. He asked, peaceful? I replied, yes. Seeing him fail without touching him, it's satisfying in a quiet way. Emma called that evening. Can we talk? She asked. I replied, again. She hesitated. I need someone to listen. I said, I'm not sure I should. She said softly, please. Just one time. I sighed. Fine. One time. She started quickly. I messed up again. I thought I could be happy with him, but he lied. Everything is falling apart. I said, I'm sorry you're hurting. She whispered, I keep thinking you'll save me, but you won't. I replied, I can't. That's the point. She cried quietly. I thought I could rely on you. I said, you relied on the wrong person. She paused. Do you hate me? I shook my head. I don't. I just survived. The next day, Rachel texted me. Did you see the news? Liam got suspended from another company. I replied, yes. I've been watching. Karma doesn't need me. She wrote back, you've already won by surviving. I smiled at my phone. That simple sentence felt heavier than any revenge I could have imagined. At work, Mark mentioned casually, Liam's reputation is shredded. He can't even get consulting gigs anymore. I said, I never thought I'd care. But seeing it unfold, it's a strange relief. He nodded. Relief without action is the purest kind. I agreed. I survived. That's the real victory. Emma called again, desperate. I don't know what to do, she said. I'm failing at everything. I replied, then stop relying on me to fix it. She said, I thought, maybe if I reach you, you'd guide me. I said firmly, I've guided myself. You need to guide you. She paused, sobbing. I wish it was different. I whispered, so do I. But it isn't. That night, Rachel came by. You look different, she said. I smiled faintly. I feel different. I used to be desperate to control outcomes. Now I watch. I survive. That's my power. She nodded. You've grown beyond vengeance. Beyond waiting for justice. I said, karma isn't mine. But seeing it unfold, it's proof that I can live without bitterness. I remembered the nights I lay awake, tortured by betrayal, imagining confrontations, imagining him suffering. None of that mattered now. Reality did it better. Liam's mistakes, Emma's failures, they were consequences, not my doing. I told Rachel, I finally understand. My survival is more important than his downfall. And yet, the downfall exists anyway. She said softly, that's victory without effort. I nodded. The next morning, I walked through the office, Olivia passing by. Morning, she said. I smiled. Morning. Mark nudged me. Feeling like a king today. I laughed. More like someone who knows what matters. He asked, and what's that? I replied, peace. Self-respect. The realization that surviving is winning. By the end of the week, Emma's calls slowed. She sent messages asking for advice, but I replied less, firmly. I can't guide you anymore, I wrote. You need to face your consequences. Silence followed. And for the first time, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. Liam had lost everything he built on selfishness. Emma struggled on her own. I had survived. I realized then that victory doesn't need drama, confrontation, or revenge. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it's letting life unfold, trusting the consequences, and walking forward without hatred. Karma had done its work. I had done mine, surviving, learning, becoming stronger. And that knowledge, that quiet victory, was worth more than any revenge I could have imagined. Emma asked for another chance on a Tuesday night, like it was an ordinary thing. She said, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to ask. I didn't answer right away. I stared at my phone and said, 3 years ago, I would have said yes without breathing. She replied, I know. I said, that version of me doesn't exist anymore. She typed, I wish I could meet this new you. I answered, you already did, and you still asked. She paused. Because I believe people can change. I said, they can, but trust doesn't follow at the same speed. She wrote, I won't hurt you again. I asked, how can you promise something you already broke? She said, because I lost everything. I replied, you didn't lose everything. You lost access to me. That silence felt loud. Rachel called me the next day. She didn't say hello. She said, don't do it. I asked, do what? She said, don't pretend you're confused. I sighed. I am confused. She answered, you're tempted, not confused. I said, what if people deserve second chances? She replied, they do, but not at the cost of your dignity. I stayed quiet. She added, you rebuilt yourself from nothing. I said, I still feel unfinished. She said, healing doesn't mean forgetting. I asked, what if saying no makes me bitter? She said, saying yes might make you small. That hit harder than I expected. At work, Mark noticed I was distracted. He asked, you okay? I said, old ghosts. He smiled. They usually want something. I told him, she wants another chance. He didn't laugh. And? I said, I don't know. He leaned back. 3 years ago, you were broken. I said, I remember. He continued, now you stand straighter. I replied, pain does that. He said, don't confuse nostalgia with progress. I asked, "What if I regret walking away again?" He shrugged. "You already know how regret feels." That shut me up. Emma called that night. I answered. She said, "Thank you." I asked, "For what?" She said, "For not blocking me." I replied, "That's not a favor." She said, "I've changed." I asked, "How?" She said, "I take responsibility now." I said, "You always apologized well." She whispered, "I'm serious." I asked, "Why now?" She said, "Because I finally understand what I lost." I replied, "Understanding doesn't undo damage." She said, "I'm not asking for the past back." I asked, "Then what are you asking for?" She said, "A future." I closed my eyes. "A future needs safety," I said. "And you don't feel safe." She whispered, "I can learn." I answered, "I already learned the hard way." She cried quietly. "I hate who I was." I said, "So do I." She asked, "Do you still love me?" That question burned. I said, "I care, but love isn't enough anymore." She said, "What changed?" I replied, "I learned to choose myself." She said, "I never asked you to disappear." I said, "You made it necessary." Silence stretched. She finally said, "So this is your answer?" I said, "This is me respecting myself." She whispered, "I understand." I didn't know if she did, but I knew I finally did. After the call, I sat alone and spoke out loud. Choosing myself doesn't make me cruel. Saying it felt like a promise. I realized something clear and painful. Loving someone isn't the same as trusting them, and trust once broken doesn't come back just because time passed. 3 years ago, I had no choice. Tonight, I did, and dignity won. I called Emma that evening. She answered before I could even speak. "Hi," she whispered. I said, "We need to talk." She hesitated. "Okay." I asked, "Can you meet me at the park?" She replied, "Yes." Her voice shook. I didn't answer. I just drove there, gripping the wheel harder than necessary. When I arrived, she was sitting on the same bench we used to share. She looked up, and her eyes widened. "You came," she said. I said, "I did." She shifted, nervously twisting her hands. What is this about?" I sat beside her, keeping space. "I need to be honest," I said. She nodded quickly. "I want the truth," she said. "I forgive you," I told her. Her eyes softened. Relief. I didn't wait. "But I don't want you back." She froze. "What?" Her voice cracked. I said, "I forgive you, Emma. But that doesn't mean I want to be with you." She swallowed hard. You mean it?" I nodded. "I mean it." Tears filled her eyes. I don't understand." I said, "You'll understand someday. Right now, you just need to hear it clearly." I thought if I begged, you'd say yes," she whispered. I shook my head. "That version of me is gone. I can't go back." She cried harder. I watched quietly. Her shoulders shook. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "I know," I replied softly. "But hurting me has consequences." She looked at me through blurred tears. I can't fix it." I said, "No, you can't. And I don't want you to." She tried to reach for my hand. I pulled it back gently. "Not this time," I said. Her lips trembled. "Then, what now?" I exhaled. "Now, we let go. Quietly. Without anger. Without drama. Just separation." She whispered, "Is it really over?" I nodded. "It's over. For good." She sobbed openly. I thought we had forever." I said, "Forever isn't about love. It's about trust. And trust is gone." She flinched at the words. "I didn't know I could lose you like this," she said. I said, "You did. And now we both face the aftermath." She reached out again. "Can we at least be friends?" I shook my head. "I can't. Not now. Maybe not ever. Right now, I need space to breathe, to live without the weight of the past. Her tears fell faster. I'm sorry, she said. I whispered, I know. But sorry doesn't change what happened. Only we can change ourselves. She wiped her face. I'll leave you alone then, she said. I nodded. Thank you. She stood, unsteady, and walked away. I stayed seated. The air was cold, but my chest felt lighter than I had in years. I realized pain could be clean. It didn't have to cling. It could release you. I thought about calling Rachel. It's done, I said quietly to myself. She would understand. I felt strange, a mix of grief and relief. Part of me ached for what could have been. Another part of me smiled quietly at what I had survived. I watched Emma disappear down the path. Her shoulders hunched, small against the fading light. I didn't run after her. I didn't stop her. I let her go. This time, walking away felt final. I whispered her name one last time, softly, without hope or bitterness. Just acknowledgement. Then I stood, straightened my coat, and walked in the opposite direction. Each step felt deliberate, measured, clean. No turning back. No lingering. I carried nothing but quiet resolve. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had found my own self again. I sat at my desk, staring at the spreadsheet but not seeing it. Mark nudged my shoulder. You've been zoning out again. I said, just thinking. He grinned. About work or something else? I shook my head. About life. He raised an eyebrow. Life, huh? Dangerous territory. I laughed softly. I survived worse. Later that week, Olivia joined our project team. She introduced herself with a smile. Hi, I'm Olivia. Excited to work with you. I nodded. Same here. Her eyes held something steady, honest. No games. No pretenses. I noticed small things. How she listened, how she remembered names, how she didn't try to impress. I thought, maybe people like this still exist. During lunch, she asked, do you want to grab coffee after work? I said, sure. My chest tightened in a way that wasn't fear. You always say yes to coffee. I teased. She laughed softly. Only to people who seem worth knowing. I replied, flattery works. She smiled. I prefer honesty. At the cafe, we talked about work, travel, books. She asked, what do you like to do when you're not busy? I said, I like quiet. Reading. Walking alone. She nodded. I like quiet too. But with company that's worth it. I smiled. Good answer. She looked at me, curious. What's your story? I paused. It's a long one. She said, I have time. I chuckled. Not everyone does. She leaned forward. I do. That made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, comfortable curiosity. We started meeting after work regularly. One evening, she asked, do you believe in second chances? I said, depends on the person. She asked softly, and me? I stuttered her. You're not the type who would need one, I said. She laughed, a genuine sound that warmed the room. Good. Because I'm honest about mistakes before they happen. One weekend, we walked through the park. I said, I used to think love was about holding on, begging, forgiving endlessly. She asked, and now? I replied, now I think love chooses. It doesn't chase. It doesn't manipulate. It just is. She smiled and touched my arm. I think you're finally free. I nodded. I feel like I am. Over coffee one morning, she asked, have you healed completely? I said, no, but I'm learning to live with the scars without letting them define me. She said, that's the first step. I laughed lightly. You make it sound easy. She smiled. It isn't. But it's worth trying. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I wanted to try. With someone who mattered, someone real. One night, she asked, do you trust me? I said, I think I can. She smiled softly. That's all I ask. I said, Trust feels different now. It's calm. Not desperate. She nodded. Good. Calm is better than chaos. I agreed. It's better than pretending pain didn't exist. She reached for my hand. I won't pretend. I squeezed hers. Neither will I. Weeks turned into months. I noticed how her presence changed the way I moved through life. I laughed more. I planned more. I didn't look back. I didn't fear what was gone. One evening, she said, "You're different than when we met." I replied, "I had to be. To meet someone like you." She smiled, genuine and steady. And I'm glad I waited. I realized I was glad too, glad I had finally chosen myself first so I could choose her without hesitation. I said softly, "Love doesn't beg anymore." She replied, "No, it chooses." I smiled and held her hand tighter. "And this feels right." She leaned on my shoulder. "It does." For the first time in years, my heart wasn't haunted. It wasn't tense. It wasn't waiting for betrayal or pain. It just existed, quietly, calmly, and fully. For the first time, I felt like someone new. I sat on the rooftop, city lights flickering below. Rachel called. "You there?" I said, "Yeah." She asked, thinking about her again. I laughed quietly, more like thinking about everything she taught me. She paused. "Everything?" I said, "Yes. Pain, loss, love, letting go." She sighed. "Sounds heavy." I replied, "It is. But it's honest." Later, Olivia texted, "Dinner tonight." I typed back, "Sure. 7. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. The memory of Emma's words came uninvited. It meant nothing. I whispered to myself, it meant everything. Everything I had, everything I lost, everything I needed to find. Rachel came by unexpectedly. "You look different." I smiled. "I am different." She asked, "Because of her?" I shook my head. "Because of me. Losing her forced me to grow." She sat beside me. "Does it still hurt?" I said, "Sometimes. But it's the good kind of hurt. The kind that reminds you what mattered." She nodded. "Closure, then." I said, "Closure and perspective." Mark stopped by my office later. "You seem lighter." I replied, "I've been learning to measure loss against growth." He asked, "Emma?" I nodded. "It's taken years, but I finally see the truth. What she said wasn't the truth, but the lesson was." He smiled. "And?" I said, "And I'm still standing." That evening, Olivia met me at the cafe. She smiled. "You're quiet today." I said, "Reflective." She asked softly, "About what?" I replied, "Life, love, mistakes, forgiveness." She nodded. "And?" I said, "And growth. You can't know who you are until you've lost who you thought you couldn't live without." She squeezed my hand. "Sounds painful." I smiled faintly. It was. And necessary. I thought about Emma again. I imagined calling her, telling her what I finally understood. I imagined her reaction, surprise, regret, maybe sadness. But I didn't call. I realized I didn't need to. The lesson wasn't in hearing her apology. It was in understanding the truth myself. That night, Rachel called again. "Do you want to talk about her one last time?" I said, "Yes, but just for reflection." I told her everything. The betrayal, the pain, the years of silence, the reunion, and finally the letting go. She listened. "You sound free," she said. I replied, "I am. Not because I forgave her blindly, but because I forgave myself for ever needing her approval." Olivia arrived later, and I left memories on the rooftop. "Dinner?" she asked. I smiled. "Yes. Let's eat." As we walked, I said, "You know, I finally understand what she meant when she said it meant nothing." She looked at me. "What?" I said, "It meant everything, to me. Losing her, learning from it, becoming myself, it really meant everything." She squeezed my hand. I'm glad it led you to now. I realized then that revenge was never the goal. Power over her feelings never mattered. What mattered was understanding my own heart, standing in my own truth, and moving forward with dignity. I said to Olivia, quietly, I used to think love was about possession. Now I know it's about choice. She smiled. And you choose well. I nodded. Finally. That night, I sat alone briefly, thinking of Emma. I whispered, it meant everything, yes. But not in the way I feared. In the way I needed. I felt no bitterness, only quiet victory. I had survived, I had grown, I had loved responsibly. And for the first time, I didn't want her back. I only wanted peace, clarity, and the life I was building. I texted Rachel, it's done. I'm finally done. She replied, good. You deserved it. I smiled. That was the last confirmation I needed. 3 years ago, a careless sentence shattered me. Today, the same sentence confirmed who I had become. I whispered again, it really meant everything. And as I looked at Olivia's face across the cafe table, steady and real, I understood. Love no longer begged. It chose. And I was finally free to choose it, fully, without hesitation, without fear.